Hey friend, welcome back to the Care Collective podcast, a space where we talk about the real, unfiltered experience of caregiving and help you feel a little less alone in the process. Today I'm sitting down with Wendy, one of the hosts of This Is Your Brain on Mom, a podcast she co-hosts with her brother as they share their mom's dementia journey. What started as something as unexpected as a fall quickly turned into a life-changing diagnosis, revealing signs that had likely been there for years. In this episode, we talk about those early, often confusing stages of dementia, the emotional reality of stepping into a caregiving role for your parent, and what it looks like to navigate it all alongside your siblings. We also talk about something really powerful, the way of using storytelling to honor the person you love even as things change. This conversation is so emotional and I think will be very relatable for a lot of people. So if you've ever felt overwhelmed or unsure in your caregiving journey, this one is for you. Let's get into it. I'd love to hear a little bit of your introduction of yourself and your podcast, and just give like a brief overview of everything.
So my name is Wendy, and my brother Barry and we're 2 out of 3 kids, and we host a podcast called This Is Your Brain on Mom. And we started it about, I would say, 6-7 months after our mom took a bad fall and broke her leg. And we thought after that she would end up back home, and she was diagnosed with Alzheimer's and never returned back to her home. And she's currently living in a nursing home. So we both work full time. We both have families and caregive for our mom. We're there 6 days a week, and we have a caregiver 1 day a week.
Yeah, and I know something that you have expressed that we were just talking about was the fact and the idea that there's not much support for right after dementia and Alzheimer's diagnoses. And I feel like there's just not a lot of education in general about signs to look for, things to notice. So I'd be curious, in your guys' experience, did they give any kind of explanation of whether, how soon this could have started? Like, assuming before the fall, there could have been signs of it, or did the fall kind of exacerbate it, even make it even worse, or any kind of timeline on that?
So, my mom had been living on her own for about 20 years at the point that she fell. And I had made the decision to bring in a caregiver 3 days a week to help her with things like showering and laundry and groceries. I didn't want her going alone. And yeah, there were weird things. She was a bit hard of hearing, so we got her hearing aid she didn't like. And we thought whatever memory loss she was experiencing was normal age-related memory loss, which now we know is not actually a thing. She went for a mini MOCA. I don't know if it's called the same thing in the US. So it's like a small geriatric assessment done by a nurse practitioner in her clinic. We were told she was fine. She continued to drive, live independently. She was retired and volunteering twice a week for the community. And after she fell, she had surgery. We were worried about her going under general anesthetic, but they assured us that the risks were the same. And after 3 weeks in the hospital in acute care, she was put in rehab to be able to learn how to walk again. And it was the staff there that started noticing things. She was aggressive, verbally, never physically. She was forgetting things. She was getting confused. And what amazed me was she took a couple of falls at the rehab as well. And at no point, so she was in the hospital for three weeks and in rehab for 4 months. And nobody ever scanned her brain. No one at any time.
Yeah.
Once we got her home and I spoke to her doctor, he said, you need to take her privately because we have socialized healthcare. We're in the province of Quebec. And we had a private CT scan done. And that was done in June. And after a lot of waiting and a lot of conversations, we got an appointment with a geriatric specialist. And we were told she's likely been living with this for 10 years. And she is now 80. So She retired at around 70. That's probably when it started. And she already had full atrophy of her frontal lobe, and it was moving bilaterally back as of last June. So that's what we know, is that she'd likely been living with it for a decade without anyone knowing.
And I think that's pretty consistently what I hear from people, is that it is something that there's stages of it, right? And it's usually pretty far into it that you actually finally hear about it. Unfortunately, sometimes it takes things like a fall or some other kind of accident to put the dots together. And I mean, I would say a mix of it, and I'd love to hear kind of your perspective on this as well. But I know in my own family, if I've ever had a loved one that we suspected was having some memory issues and wanted them to get tested, it's kind of this big emotional thing because you don't want to. This is one of the worst things to get diagnosed with, in my opinion, personally. I think it's part emotional denial in the process. Part of it is just you don't think about it. You're just like, I'm just being forgetful or things are happening, right?
Well, I think it's really easy to bury your head in the sand, especially when it's your parent and your only parent, right? We only have our mom. And I was involved. My mother has always been my person and in my day to day, every single day of my life. And my brothers were also super close with my mom, but it wasn't the same everyday, constant contact. So when I did notice weird things and I said it to them, they told me I was crazy.
Right.
So, and we also have to take into account that my mother's father had Alzheimer's and his mother as well.
Right.
So I think there was a lot of fear for my mother and a lot of fear in us. And, with my mom being her personality, sometimes taking the path of least resistance is the best. You can't fight with I'm still her
I
kid.
get that. Yeah.
But once she ended up in rehab, we couldn't deny it anymore. And my brothers couldn't, because the first time, it was last March, we took her out for dinner and we got to the rehab to pick her up. And she was wearing every item of clothing that I had brought to the rehab, every top. And my brother and Barry and I were together. I said, Mom, why are you wearing everything? She's like, I don't know. I said, okay. And changed her. And at the restaurant, she did not speak. She just sat there quiet. She couldn't figure out how to pick her food up with the fork. And my other brother was sitting facing her like no one knew what to do. No one knew how to handle this because it was so unexpected and it was so fast. It has gone so fast that if you had told me the day before this happened that I would be in this position, I would have been like, yeah, okay, whatever.
Right. Yeah. And I think it's just jarring when you see that person that has been so strong for you, for your family, to watch that. That's really hard. And that's a lot to kind of take in.
We try to, there's still a lot of her there. Like there's still a lot of her there and a lot of, her sarcasm and her humor. It's still there. So we really appreciate when we get to see those moments and have those moments with her.
Yeah.
And I think for now, at least from my perspective, I'm done mourning that part. And I think now I'm just trying to keep my head above water for all of us.
Yeah.
Because I don't have time for it now. There's too many of us,
No, that makes a lot of sense. And speaking on that note, have you found, even managing your siblings' grief, I guess you could say, probably your kids being sad about some of this too, right? What has that experience been like for you?
It's very funny because I feel like I have to take on the role of mother with my siblings. And if Barry were here, he'd be shaking his head.
You're like,
And you're not my mother. But I feel that I need to be the sounding board and I need to be the strong one because I am responsible for all my mother's decisions. So
Right.
I can't let my emotions take over too much. And my kids are teenagers and for the most part they're okay now.
Right.
But we were with my mom on the weekend and she had dozed off and my daughter is 14 and she just was sitting there crying because it's hard to watch a woman who is so full of life now not having that flair that she had.
Yeah.
But then, she woke up 10 minutes later and my son was a little sassy with me and she was like, no. And she put him in her place. So I really feel like and it's I don't think anyone else thinks I'm their mother because Barry would
True.
definitely be like, you're not my mother. But
Yeah. But
I
to
feel
you,
like
it
I need to
feels like
take on that role.
that responsibility. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, that makes sense.
Yeah.
I would love to kind of hear as well how you guys decided to start telling your story and even sharing from a place of, I talk to so many caregivers that I think would like to share their story in different ways. I met some people that have written books. You guys started a podcast. So, what was kind of your motivation for wanting to share this process? More for yourself or for others or
I think so. Barry is a big advocate for therapy. I've done it and I think it's great, but I think you have to be ready and you have to be open to receiving.
I'd
And
agree
I
with that.
just I didn't think, and I mean, I know at this point in time, I don't have the time or the space for it. So we would speak to each other and we'd be like, how are you I spent months crying, months curled up in
Yeah.
a ball crying. And my friends would call, how are you? And be like, I'm surviving. I'm not thriving. And then I'm
Yeah.
like, that's a great name for a podcast. And my husband is in this business. This is his world. And I started talking to him about it. And he's like, you should do it. And Barry and I always talked about collaborating on something. When we were younger, we were both wanted to be lawyers. We were going to have a firm together, or we
Yeah.
were going to open a restaurant together. And I said, do you want to do a podcast? And he's like, yeah. So it started for us,
Mm.
but really, and I've said this before, it's a labor of love for it's a love story for our mom.
Yeah.
It's our way of, I think, building her legacy
Mm.
and just letting the world know how important she is to us and how hard this is. Nobody has to be alone in this. There are so many,
Yeah.
whether it be a podcast like yours, a podcast like ours, or books or vlogs and blogs and all this stuff. There's so much out there on the internet. And we've met so many amazing people, and nobody should be alone in this journey.
Absolutely. And I think, there are so many different ways to document your journey and to honor that person. There's people now that they film the interviews do like
Hmm.
a legacy interview of someone, right? And I think it's something that maybe in the moment you might not be able to watch if it's too painful to think about losing that person. But I'm sure like years later, that's going to be such a gift to be able to have this, to be able to have these moments,
And
recorded.
we've done that. Barry did it when mom was a little
Mhm.
more clear. Barry did a full interview with her that we aired. And I think, I was driving through the neighborhood we grew up in, and that was hard enough for me today.
Yeah.
But, before my husband's grandmother passed, we bought a storybook back then that you could hit record, and she read
Mhm.
the storybook because my son was the only great grandchild at the time, and he was a year old. We still
Yeah.
have never opened the book, and she's been gone for 15 years. So I'm happy that we don't have to wait that long to show the world who our mom is.
And I think in that sense too, I think there is such a stigma around just elderly people in general. Like people get scared to go visit a nursing home or like they see somebody acting out and, the behavioral side, like you mentioned. So I think that's what I really appreciate about your guys' way that you're going about this too and respecting, her wishes as well. And I think that was another topic you brought up to me before is being very respectful and managing consent, because if somebody cannot give consent to be recorded, then that's the answer. There is no consent there, right?
So anytime we record her, she knows. We
Right.
ask. I always say, Mom, can I record? Like we just posted of her getting fitted for a lap restraint. She was
Mm,
laughing. She was joking. I always ask her first. I show her the pictures before I post anything
yeah.
because my mom doesn't look like herself anymore. And if I was posting a picture of you and me together, I would show it to you before I post it. If you didn't like what you look like, I wouldn't post it and tag you in that. And she's still a person. She still has the ability to consent.
Right. And I mean, there's a lot of talk about kids and if you should be posting them on the internet or not. And I think there's a lot of discussions to be having about the elderly, about,
Yeah.
anybody who maybe has any other kind of mental or physical disability that maybe is prohibiting them from being able to be a part of that conversation, because I think, again, yes, showing diversity and showing all these different stories is very important so people can see themselves in the media. But I think, being able to include and respect their wishes is the most important thing above anything else.
If you look at any of our content, you'll see pictures of my son because he
Mm,
has consented to his picture being there. My daughter has refused consent to
right.
her picture being there. That's why, I mean, there might be some pictures coming up if she agrees to it, but otherwise, you'll see her from the back. You won't see her face. We have another brother who he has not consented to being in any of our content. He has a son
Mhm.
who's under the age of consent. He has refused consent for his son to be on anything. And I
Right.
think everyone has that right. And just because someone is disabled or not cognitively able, well, then if they're not cognitively able, they shouldn't be posted on social media.
Right.
It's
Like that's
not
your answer.
okay. Yeah.
So, and I think that is something that as I scroll and I see this happening. Like even today, somebody just sent me a post of, let me see if I can find it because it was just bizarre. It was an Atlanta based plastic surgeon who is facing multiple malpractice lawsuits for negligence after she was reportedly dancing and singing while performing surgery. And one of the suits was filed by a family who claims the doctor left their mother with permanent brain damage. Like, that's just, it blows my
You
mind.
know, I've seen caregivers post questionable content when it comes to their loved ones with cognitive, like Alzheimer's, any form of dementia, and some do it in a very respectful way, and some really infantilize their parent or their loved one, and I have no space for that. Like,
Yeah,
she's not my child; she is my mother,
right.
and I don't
How do you
like.
kind of walk that line, or what are boundaries you set? Like, I know some people will set a hard line that they do not want to bathe their parent because they
I
feel like
don't.
that's lines, right?
So, mom is on a behavioral floor in a nursing home on a memory care floor.
Mhm.
I will not, like, I'll wash her face or her hands, but I'm not involved in any of her toileting or like
Right.
physical that.
More private things.
That's that. Like, because I wouldn't have done that before. I wouldn't have been in the like with her for that. Why would I be there
Yeah.
now? I'll change her clothes, like I'll change her shirt or her socks, her shoes, what all that. She's at a point where some days she cannot feed herself and she has a hard time
Mhm.
maneuvering cutlery.
Mhm.
I will feed her 100%. I push her around in the wheelchair, but if she asks me to do something ridiculous, I'm like, no, like, no. I'll brush her
Yeah.
hair. She has to go to the bathroom. She'll be like, can you take me to the bathroom? No, no, you can. There's someone else here for that. That's not.
Yeah.
Barry has different boundaries. Barry will not do any of the no changing, no dress. I mean, socks, whatever. Nothing that involves her not wearing clothes.
Sure.
That's a hard stop for him.
No, I could understand that. And I think the important thing there is to figure out what you're comfortable with and just to know that there's options and varying levels of support, which I know is different in Canada sometimes, it sounds like.
So when she was in assisted living and I had to take her to appointments, then I didn't have a choice. I did take her to the bathroom and I changed what I had to change and dealt with what I had to deal with. But I knew it was going to be like a very short term period of my life. Keeping mom at home with one of us was never an option.
Mm,
It wouldn't have worked for any
yeah.
the three, no one, none of the kids, and that's okay. And I don't like people who judge others for the way they care give.
Yeah.
It's hard no matter how you do it, whether you have them at home or they're in their home or the way we have it. You're still losing your loved one. They're still dealing with a terminal illness, and none of us need to be judged on what we're doing if we're doing the best we can.
Right. And I think, like you said, it's hard either way because something that you might experience that other people might not is maybe feeling guilty for not being there 24/7, right? Like I have seen people that have that reaction to not being able to take care of them, you know? So I think no matter which direction you choose, like it's going to be hard. And so just supporting people in their decision is the most important thing you can do for someone, right?
And I think when you have an online platform that people, I don't know if I'm sorry if you hear my dog barking.
Here.
People feel okay to judge, like keyboard
Right.
warriors, you know. And I think, walk a mile in my shoes.
Mm,
Do what I do in a day. Watch your mom deteriorate, and then you can tell me. It's
right.
like people who try to parent, or they're the best parents in the world,
Yeah.
and they have no kids. You can be the best parent in the world until you actually have to parent somebody and raise them properly with morals, right?
Have you guys gotten a lot of hate kind of comments then, or people that comment weird things?
No, no, no. Generally, I find this community to be super supportive.
Yeah.
But I think anybody you look at these, what's in the headlines now, right? The Mormon Secret Lives of Mormon Wives,
Yeah.
Taylor Frankie Paul, and everyone's judging. And I'm listening to podcasts. Like I have a very big interest in religion. That's my academic background.
Mm.
And people commenting or they're not depicting Mormonism in the right way. I don't think this show was ever meant to be about Mormonism. But there's so much hate. There's so much hate, and I'm like, this was never about being a Mormon.
No.
It was clickbait. Like the word Mormon just caught people's
Right.
attention, and it
Well,
happened to be in Utah, and they
and that's
all
the
at
thing
one
too
point
is
were members of the church.
right.
I think it's really easy for somebody so far removed from her situation, our situation, to judge. And they
Mhm.
don't know. They don't know what we're living through. We don't know what she's living through.
The extremes to the caregiving social media world is that you've got all these people that are posting like the abuse cases and all the crazy things that happen. And there's one account that I've seen where she posts about like beauty related abuse that happen, like in the sense that if they're not caring for their hair
Mm-hmm.
and nails, that can cause a lot of health issues for the elderly, in particular in nursing homes. So if they don't have good programs, that can become a major problem for the residents, right?
Mm-hmm.
Anyways, that's what her account is focused on. And I think that's a topic, obviously, we need to be educated, but still, I think sharing these happy moments when you can find it, like when you're in such a dark sphere, such a dark portion of your life, when you have so many challenging things, then to
Yeah.
open your phone and be bombarded with all of this negativity can just be too much sometimes.
I think in anything, whether it be religion or politics or care, there's extremism. There's people who literally make themselves so sick trying to be everything to everyone in their lives. And that includes the person that they're caregiving for. And I was lucky enough to have the conversation with Barry and the conversation with our spouses and realize we were not in any way going to be able to manage
Mm.
caring for mom at home. We have a lot of stairs in our house. Both of us have a lot of stairs. My kids are at home. A big factor is mom would not want the kids to remember her like this. Her
Mm.
biggest thing, is when someone is dead, don't look at them. You don't want to remember them that way.
Mm.
She's deteriorating, and she wants them to remember who she was, a year and a half ago. Keeping her at home would not allow that.
Right.
Neither did Barry. We didn't want her to ever feel like a burden. And she's not. She's our mom, and she is the only thing when we're with her. I'm not worried about, oh, I need to do this with my kid or I need to take him there.
Mm.
I know that's taken care of and my time can be focused on mom. You can
Right.
be a loving caregiver and supportive and present and not have them with you 100% of the time. You don't have to.
Right. And I believe you guys said you live an hour from where she's at now, even? Was that
No,
what?
because she's about 25 minutes
Okay.
unless there's snow and, but we're getting to the end of that now. We're coming
Yeah,
to the
yeah,
end.
yeah.
There's light at the end of the tunnel
You
for
still
us
have
with the
snow?
weather. Yeah, we've had more snow this month than we had all
Mm.
winter. We had 2 snow days like 2 weeks
Yeah.
ago. So she's about 25 minutes from us. And, they called me yesterday. The doctor was going to be there in an hour.
Mm.
So popped in the car, went, got mom whatever I knew she was going to want when I got there,
Sure.
drove over. I'm there 3 to 4 days a week. Barry's there 3 days a week. And I mean, she doesn't like when we're not there. She's not a happy camper, I can tell you that. But she's happy when we're there, and we're happy when we're there.
Yeah, no, I think that can make a big difference, and I'm glad you guys are close enough to be able to see
Yeah.
her.
Yeah.
Because I think it makes it easier for both of you, because I'm sure you also would rather get to see her and, spend time with her as well.
Well, it's a 3-hour excursion between driving there and back and
Yeah,
getting her coffee and settling. And then if she doesn't want me to leave, there's always a little bit of time,
sure.
but it's built into my schedule now.
Hmm.
It's built in. My husband's incredibly supportive. He travels a lot, but when your kids are teenagers, sometimes you got to be like, you can get yourself home from school. Like, buddy, you
Right,
can figure it out.
right. Yeah, which on this note of how much time it takes, I don't have the headline pulled up anymore, and I want to say this might have been just limited to the US, but the AARP, I think, just did another study of how many hours caregivers are putting into taking care of other people. And the number actually jumped up to $1 trillion.
Have you also seen the statistics that it's primarily female labor? It's
Mm-hmm.
primarily women, daughters that are putting in those hours.
Right. And I think that's even just interesting to think about because, I've heard that even in cases of a daughter in law taking care of a parent in law is more common than the son
I
taking
have
care of.
friends who the husband, he's my friend. We've been friends for a very long
Mhm.
time. His parents lived with his dad's mom, and the daughter-in-law was the primary caregiver to the mother-in-law.
Yeah. So, I
I
mean, I
think
know,
it's cultural too. In some cultures, I think it's just culturally expected.
right. No, but I think it is interesting to think about how dominated care is by women. And I think that's one reason why I hope that our political spheres or the people that are influencing these policies, we start to get more women in the room because that's who can speak to that experience, right? As a caregiver.
Well, I think the way the government is in the US right now, it might not be so, open. We're currently under a liberal government. I think Canadian politics are very different than American politics. I think there happen to be quite a few women in the room in Canadian politics. And do I think that they will have an influence? I certainly hope so. But I also notice on my mom's floor there's a lot. So we have what we call PABs, which are, I don't know, orderlies, or they're the caregivers that work on the floor. I don't know what you call them.
Maybe a CNA level of what we have here.
Yes, probably. And there's a lot of men.
Hmm.
There's a lot of men. And I think it's great because there's a lot of men on the floor.
I think we need more men in care in general. I mean, like, I'm sure a elderly man would probably feel better having another man provide bathing or toileting services, right?
And
Like, I
not
think
just
that
that,
that's
I
very.
was speaking to one of them and I'm like, "Do you shave? Like, do the women shave the men or
Mhm.
do you shave the men?" He's like, "Well, the shaving, the women do. They're okay with that, but when it comes to like the hair, he's like, it's easier for me to do it because I know what they want and I
Right.
can do, right? I can maneuver the shaver in a way and cut the hair that they're comfortable with."
Mhm.
I think in some cases, and I know this will get a lot of, I don't know, there should be a nursing home separate floors. A women maybe, not just for, I know in my community, there are institutions that, are religious. And so therefore they do separate men and women,
That
but
makes sense.
also for the fact of, my mom is a domestic abuse survivor
Mm.
and she's confused enough.
Right.
And some of the men on the floor can be aggressive.
Mm.
And she's okay with the male caregivers. That she's good with, but it can triggers her. It definitely triggers her. And I
Yeah.
think, as time goes on, we're going to see a lot,
More.
or I'm sure that there are a lot of domestic abuse survivors, but it wasn't as spoken as, we didn't talk about it when our
Right.
parents were younger, right? And it's going to be a whole other generation of women and men who have survived all kinds of abuse. And
Mm.
as they age and maybe regret cognitively, they won't be able to live in a mixed environment like that. And I think that's
Yeah.
something our governments need to, and healthcare systems need to really look at.
No, I could agree with that, and I it reminds me of this SVU episode. I don't know if you've ever watched that tons,
Yeah.
but there was a case where they were trying to figure out if an elderly woman had been assaulted or if she was remembering
Yeah.
an old assault, and that was
Yeah.
nearly impossible for them to sort through. And I think that there unfortunately are going to be cases like that that you're just going to have to, like you
Yeah.
said, the only solution is to separate. And I've heard, unfortunately, of behavioral problems with my dad worked in geriatrics as a
Hmm.
nurse practitioner, and there were patients that he would have to be the only one that could manage them anymore because as they behaviorally progress as well, and again, get more aggressive, like you're talking about, none of the female nurses could handle being around them, or sometimes they
You
even had to
know,
fire patients and discharge them from a
well,
facility.
so we're dealing with that because mom she's exhibiting behaviors. She's not physically aggressive in any way.
Sure.
She's screaming. She's
Right.
just screams a lot and they don't like it. They're
Mm.
short staffed. I've said it to you and I've said it a million times. The healthcare system where we live is very, very broken and they can't manage her. They're having a hard time managing her. And so there's a lot of discussion as to what's going to happen. But yesterday I was standing in the dining room with my mom and an elderly man went at one of the nurses
Mm.
and she stopped it. And I said to her, I'm like, doesn't it scare you? She's like, no. She's like, it
Yeah.
is what it is. And I'm like, okay. I've seen fights break out on that floor. I'm telling you.
I'm sure, which I saw one caregiver before, and I wish I could know her account so I could give her an actual shout out. But she had to one on one caregiving situation where she was going to somebody's home and helping them, and he would, make a pass at her occasionally and stuff. And somebody had commented once and was like, "How do you just okay and you just kind of redirect? And I don't know how you're so good at this." And she's like, "Well, cognitively, he doesn't understand."
And, apparently my mother yells at the CNAs and the nurses and says, this is not what I'm paying you for.
Mm,
And, this is being brought to me. I'm like, what do you want me to do? She
right? Like,
doesn't know. She doesn't know that it's like, I tell her if I'm on the phone or I'm there, I'm like, you can't talk to people that way. She doesn't remember that 5 minutes later. She's not
well,
trying to be rude or mean.
Right. And so I don't even know the answer or what the fine line is of how much you're supposed to have consequences or, which again, you're not her mom, so you can't. What are you going to say? I'm not going to bring you coffee because you yelled at people.
But
Like,
when
just
I
ignore
said to her once, I'm like, you can't do that. And then she's
it.
like, what are you going to do about it? She's like, why? Because you said so? And she laughed. And I'm like, well, yeah, I don't really have a leg to stand on. She's my
Right.
mother.
Yeah.
And then I
So,
called
yeah.
Barry. I'm like, I've retired. You can deal with her now. He's like,
Yeah.
no, no,
He's like, I don't have a better answer either.
nah. Yeah.
So I mean, but I will say that I don't know if this has been your experience, but I just feel like I've met some really good people. I know that there are some bad eggs that get involved in senior care, and I think that makes people nervous sometimes. But I've also just met some amazing people that I'm like, you were born for this profession, and I am so glad that you are good at taking care of people because we need people like that. Just truly they are good at it, and I appreciate the dedication.
We have had nothing but really amazing. I'm going to say the CNAs are amazing and the nurses, for the most part, are amazing. Our issue is with the doctor.
Yeah, I think that's usually.
That's our issue. Otherwise, I'd have to say everyone we've encountered in this journey, which has been like 15 months now, it's literally this one doctor. Otherwise, we cannot complain. I mean, compared to some of my people we know in this province that are trying to have their parents placed because it all goes by waiting lists. There's really no private nursing home. You have to have
Mhm.
full time in home care. The process went pretty quickly for us and smooth ish, as smooth as can be.
Yeah.
We are lucky to be in a community based nursing home religiously. Our mom can practice
Mm,
and we can be there and practice with her in a way that is accepting and safe.
yeah.
And there's all kind like they don't shut the door to people who are not Jewish, but
Sure.
it's it is a community-based it is a community-based facility funded by the government. So anybody could be placed there. But
Mm,
it's somewhere where she feels comfortable in that sense and everyone there is great. It's literally one dog. And I always say to them like good luck because I don't know how you're doing this for 7.5 hours at a time.
yeah. That's what I mean by
It's
like some of these are literal angels dropped out of the sky, and I'm like,
I always say, just tell me what you need. Does she need more shampoo? Does she need, because it's included. We don't have to provide that stuff, but I want my mom to have the comforts of things she knows. As
yeah.
long as she needs more clothes, she needs more this, she needs more, just tell me. Just tell me what you need.
Now, do you see that same kind of support for the other residents
No,
that are there? Are
no.
you like one of the only ones that shows up?
There
At
are a
least like
couple.
maybe
So I'm there during the day, mostly, like late morning. I'm there for lunch with her. And Barry goes in the evenings and on Sundays. I've bumped into people because, like I said, it is a community facility. So you bump into people so I've seen people, yes, they come by to visit. The majority of the people do not have daily visits, which I find interesting because they're trying to push one-to-one care for my mother because she's
they.
behavioral, but the lady who wanders the hall and falls asleep in other people's bed and takes off her clothes and, has an ankle monitor because they're scared she's going to elope.
Right.
I don't know what they're pushing, but she doesn't have a lot of visitors. So you
Mhm.
get to know the people. You see a lot of spouses. I see a lot of spouses when I'm there during the day.
Mhm. Mhm.
So that's hard. I think that's harder than being the kid,
Yeah.
is because your spouse generally is, kind of around your age and you share a
Yeah.
life and then you don't.
Right. And then and you get this way, I guess, with your children as well. But as your memory regresses, how long you're going to remember those people, I feel like that, again, is what makes it one of the hardest things.
So what I notice is the majority of the people there tend to recognize their loved
Mhm.
ones in
Mhm.
some way. I mean, some are not, they don't speak anymore, but their eyes do light up and they get happy. And, there's some of the people there's some of the ladies that get very happy when I show up.
Mhm.
Because I go up and I say hi to everybody and
Mhm.
whoever wants a hug. One lady asked me if I'd go bowling with her, and it was the only thing she has said to me in months that was
Yeah.
like a cohesive
Yeah.
sentence. And I was like, sure.
Yeah.
And then
Let's go.
I gave her a newspaper and she was happy.
Yeah.
Everyone deserves, it's not just my mom, everyone deserves love,
Absolutely. And I think I did some activities before for a memory care unit, and that's one of the things I remember is just the feeling of finally getting someone to warm up to you and get them to make eye contact and
Yeah.
smile. And maybe you both are just sitting there and we were just both laughing at a TV show or something. And, again, she wasn't saying anything coherent. It was just kind of that babbling,
Yeah.
that people can get to. But I was just like, oh yeah, that was really funny. Yeah, I like that thing that just happened on the TV show, right? And just their eyes light up when somebody is,
Yeah,
you
there's
know,
one lady, she speaks, but she doesn't speak English anymore. And I went up and I patted her on the, and I was saying hi, and she like grabs me and this like smile. Granted, it required a CNA to help me get out of the embrace.
yeah,
But there's a man, he sits in the hallway and he's I guess they find him disruptive. It doesn't bother me. It's just background noise. He
sure,
doesn't acknowledge me, but every time I walk past, I'm like, hi. I call him by his name. I address him. I make eye contact. I say hi. I keep going.
right,
And for a second, just for a second, he makes eye contact and he goes back to what he's doing. And life can be lonely at any age, but can you imagine like sitting and staring at four walls and having no
hmm
control of what's going on with your brain or your life anymore?
right. Or what I wonder about some of these people that we're talking about that can't coherently talk anymore. I'm like, do they think they're talking to me? Because I can't imagine the
Oh,
frustration
this
about.
lady does.
Yeah,
This
like
lady,
I can't imagine that.
she walks up to me with her walker and she's talking and she's very animated.
Oh
And
yeah.
she's like pointing, she'll point to my watch. And she's
Mm,
like I can tell she's asking me a question because there's that question mark,
mm,
at the end of whatever she's saying. I try my best. I'm like, yeah, that's my watch. And like I talk about the watch and then I think she changes subjects,
mm,
but she believes what she's saying to me
right.
is fully coherent. And I know you talk to all different kinds of caregivers. Have you ever talked to someone who's like a caregiver for a person with autism?
Mhm. I have.
So I have a son on the spectrum, and it is my firm belief that my son he would be considered an Aspie. Like he's
Mm,
fully able to exist without anyone knowing that
sure.
he's on the spectrum. But we have someone in our family who's he's nonverbal and and I always say, yeah, I think he knows way more than anyone gives him credit for. I
Yeah.
think just because somebody has cognitive deficit, if you want to call it,
Mm,
doesn't mean they they just can't process or they're nonverbal. It just doesn't that
right.
connection is no longer there. That doesn't mean they can't think.
Yeah, no, I just saw a clip of Miley Cyrus at the Hannah Montana reunion
Mhm.
talking afterwards to, I think her name is Abby from Love on the Spectrum. Do you know who I'm talking about?
Yes, yes.
Yeah, talking to her, and everyone was like, "Wow, I love how she is talking to her and is not babying her. Like she is fully present, asking her questions just like she would any other person she talks to. Like this is an example of how you should not act weird if somebody is different.
Like ableism shouldn't be a thing. My son is a regular average person. He's a person and
Right,
he's aware of like, if he needs space or quiet or things are too, he knows his limitations. He's 16 and he
sure,
has friends on the spectrum and we have family on the spectrum. They're not, I say hello, I talk to them. They may not be able to answer me, but guess what? Like I'm talking to them like I'm talking to everyone else in the room.
right,
Same thing with my mom. I go in and I talk to my mother like I would have before all of this. And some days she will connect, and some
right.
days she just stares at me like I've told her something she doesn't understand. But let me tell you something. She remembers all of my best friends.
Mm,
Well, I FaceTime one of my friends who, I've had a lot of my friends since childhood.
sure.
She knows exactly who she's talking to.
Yeah, and I mean, again, well, it was interesting talking to someone that is a coach, executive functioning coach, more so for ADHD, but she's
Hmm.
helped take care of her father with dementia. And so she's like, honestly, there's a lot of parallels in your brain and how it functions between those
Hmm.
two. And anyway, so she was explaining to me the concept of don't speak up for your person. Like, you need, if they forget a word for something, give them time to think about it. That's okay. You don't need to rush in and be like, yeah, that's the TV remote, fill in the blank, right?
So it's funny that you're telling me that because mom's dementia is really in the frontal lobe. And
Mm,
your frontal lobe controls your executive function. And my son's autism is very social and kind of connected to, so there was a lot of conversations when he was younger about keeping things like in the thought bubble, and you can't say
Mm,
that out loud. And how are you making other people feel? How do they make you feel? And like
mhm.
mirroring like facial expressions.
Yeah.
And my mother, it's like I just got through all the therapy of getting my son, like where he gets that
Mhm.
like social dynamic ish. And now I'm there, but on the other side of it with my mom, because now her
Right.
executive function is shot. And
Right.
this coach you're talking about, she is 100% right. Like we, throughout the process of encouragement, like you need to talk. You have a voice still.
Yeah, no, that's
If
interesting then that it's opposite for how those process. And I think that's something to keep in mind is to research the specifics of what your person is going through so you don't automatically just push the wrong approach on them. You know what I mean?
dementia, people assume dementia is memory loss and Alzheimer's is memory loss. It is. It
That's a
is.
piece.
It's a piece of it. And the way I was explained it recently by the occupational therapist is so right. Like the frontal lobe is all that executive function. And then as it starts to travel back, it's more like your physical body. Which is
Mm,
my mother is, people is she's putting herself on the floor. She's doing these weird things. She can't explain it. I don't know. My mother never sat on the floor in her life, like ever. I don't know. But
right.
you see people that are in a wheelchair that are sitting in a certain position and they're almost frozen. So like that's where it's moving bilaterally. And when it gets
Mhm.
further towards other spots, it affects language more. And
Right.
you can't. My mother will be like, "Oh, yesterday your brother was here and he brought me a coffee and we talked about this." But then I'll say to her, "Mom, what'd you have for lunch?" And she's like, "I didn't have lunch."
Right.
So and it's if you've talked to one person with dementia, you've talked to one person with dementia. If you've spoken to one person with autism, you've spoken to one person with autism.
Right. It's so broad and there's just so much, you know, I guess you could almost apply the spectrum analogy to dementia and memory
100%.
loss as well, right? Because there's so many different ranges, there's so many different progressions of it. And I think again that's why I wish more people were educated on the earlier stages because it's not that there's really anything you can do to fix it or prevent it, but to my understanding there are some medications that you could take earlier on.
So we spoke with David. It's at David's Alzheimer's Fight. That's
Mm,
his Instagram. He's 74 and he was diagnosed with Alzheimer's. He was diagnosed early, so
yeah.
he is on medications to help deal with the
Mhm.
symptoms and stuff. And he started a podcast. He started a podcast and he started a peer to peer support group. And he gives talks to people going through similar experiences.
Yeah.
And the fact that he was able to catch it himself early, he started noticing it because of the field of work he was in and he was forgetting passwords.
Mm,
And in such a short time, he's done so much with that diagnosis. But that's
mhm.
because he was self aware enough and brave enough to say something's not
Right,
right.
right,
And he has also been able to make plans for his future and choices for his future that I have to make now for my mom. She wasn't given the opportunity. I mean, she has a mandate and a living will and that stuff. She's very clear, but
sure.
he's able to decide. My mother didn't want to be in a nursing home. She had worked in one of these two nursing homes that were, she's like, "Don't ever put me there." And I had no choice.
Right,
But he's able to prepare for his future now and prepare his children and his wife for that future. And he's
right.
making the best of this. He is like so upbeat and he's so positive.
Mm,
And he does his podcast with I don't know, she's a doctor of Dr. Nancy, I think it's Dr. Nancy Gilbert. And she's not a medical doctor, but they do their podcast together. And he has made just lifestyle changes, more exercise, less, no alcohol, less, no sugar, taking out some of the fat. And
sure.
he's good. Like he's in a good spot right now, thankfully. But you have to be brave and self aware. And as kids, we have to be brave enough to like maybe push a
Right.
little bit harder.
They are very scary symptoms, and I'm not trying to say this is anywhere near comparison to the level of dementia or Alzheimer's, but I remember after I got in my car accident and was dealing with post-concussive symptoms and was having just
Oh,
the
yeah.
brain fog and the memory. It was weird because I was in a bookstore with my fiance and he was trying to, we were looking for books for his sisters for Christmas. And he gave me a list of like 5 different books and then was like, okay, you can go look for this one, this one, this one. And I walked away and I was like, I don't remember a word of what he has said. Like I went back 2 or 3 more times and I couldn't remember any of it, and I just remember feeling like that was a really weird experience to have had it just that fast.
You know what?
Um,
I've heard of people. I have a friend who got, I think it was like 2 concussions in 2 years.
yeah,
And she
that
was
thing is weird.
bedridden. It was bad.
Yeah.
It was bad. And it wasn't one of them, she fell up the stairs in her house.
Mm,
But the other one, we were in a PTA meeting. And, I sometimes laugh when I tell the story because it sounds funny. But I was at the head of the table and she was sitting like around the corner and she was there and and then she was gone. Her
mm,
chair snapped like backwards and she fell backwards and landed on her head. It's not funny, but after, when everything was said and done and she was okay, we all giggled a little bit, but she was suffering for
mm.
a very, very, very long time from that concussion. It was life altering.
Yeah. So it's just, I think these brain injuries can be, I mean, any big health scare is scary,
But it's
but
not
it's
just
when
brain
you're,
injuries. As women, no, you're not there yet. You're gonna, hopefully one day have a family and have kids.
yeah,
And there is nothing more humbling than trying to remember what you need at the grocery store or bumping into someone
absolutely.
when you've been up for 3 days with a newborn who has colic.
Mm-hmm.
And you look at someone and you just blank, you completely blank on their name.
Right.
And then you'll get older, just like we all do. And if
It
we're
happens.
lucky, and go through the perimenopause and the menopausal thing. And that brain, that is not, I get scared probably weekly that I have some form of dementia. And
Yeah.
it's really just my hormones just
Yeah. No, I
knocking
think
and just
that,
the stress of life.
oh, yeah, absolutely. And I think, again, that's where it can be tricky to be like, is this a memory problem or am I just stressed and that's why I'm forgetting things, right?
We'll have this conversation again after you've had your first child.
Yeah.
And, you're the oldest, right? So I'm sure you saw your mom go through.
I still see her go through it at times. And I know I go through it at times too, where I'm like,
Some days I don't know my own kids' names. I've called my son by the dog's name. It happens.
mm-hmm,
There's
mm-hmm.
a lot
Oh,
of
my
people in my family.
my mom will still mix up me and my 13-year-old sister because she looks just like me. And so
That's
she'll
crazy.
still just like be like, "Oh, Michaela." She'll look at me and be like, "Hannah." And I'm like, "Who's Hannah?" Not me.
No.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, but there's three of us, and then there's like, we're each married, and then there's six
Yeah.
grandkids and three dogs. And my mother was just like, like there was just so there, even that's why, like, she would forget our names, but even as kids, she would mix us up. And I'm a
Right.
girl
So
and they're
why is
boys.
that?
Like, I don't understand. But I will look at my daughter and call her by my son's name and like have a like completely, and she's like,
Mm-hmm.
and she's looking around. She's like, I'm not him. Like, who are you talking to?
Like, who are you trying to call right now? Because certainly
But
it's
I'm telling you, that's humbling when you have a baby who's been awake. And I'm sure you've seen it in your own home. And
yes.
you stare at someone and you're like, I know you.
Mm-hmm.
I know how to use the toaster, but it's just
Right.
escaping me at the moment.
Right. No, there was something I forgot the other day. I thought I misplaced my social security card, my passport,
Oh,
and my birth
gosh.
certificate. And it turned out to just have slipped behind the drawer, but I was like about to freak out and be like, I don't know where it could be. Anyways,
I lose my phone. It's like a joke in my house. My pods, my phone, my keys, thankfully now my
sometimes
car
I'll be
light.
on the phone and be like, where's my phone at?
I had a friend and we were in our we might have been maybe 20, 21. And it was a time of portable phones in the house, right? We had
Mm,
cell phones, but she was talking to me and she walked out of her apartment and closed the door and she kept going.
mm,
And then she was gone. And then she showed up at my house 10 minutes later because she walked out of the house still talking to me on the portable phone and forgot and just went along her merry way to the
yeah,
elevator, down to the car. I think once you've experienced watching someone, especially for, Barry and I right now, and I don't know about our other brother, we haven't discussed it with him yet, but
sure.
clearly there's something hereditary there
Mm,
on my mom's side. And eventually we will have to be brave and courageous and, maybe look into that. But the geriatrician said to me, he's like, don't ruin your life. And
mm,
because we can't help you.
mm.
So live your life and live it fully without that weight.
Yeah, I've seen that with People with Huntington's, for example, not
Yeah.
wanting to get tested because it's gonna happen no matter what, right? So I might as well just
Yeah.
make the most of life. And I think lately there's been some things that have come up in our family that we've realized, oh, maybe we should get genetically tested for this to
So
figure out if things happen.
that's really interesting. So within our community, there is a prevalent there's like a genetic illness that runs in the Jewish community, especially
Right.
specifically out of Eastern Europe.
Yeah.
And when I got pregnant with my son, she said to me, were you tested? So in private schools, in the Jewish school system, they test students in high school.
Mm.
So they know if they're carriers. I went through the
Mm.
public school system and she said, were you ever tested? And I said, no. She's like, well, you need to go.
Right.
My husband had been tested. He didn't remember what
Mm.
his results were. But luckily, my mom knew that neither her nor my father were carriers. So I shouldn't be. But those 15, it took 15. I saw the doctor at 8 weeks. It took 7 weeks. I was already 15 weeks pregnant when I found out that I was not a carrier of that mutation. And my mother's family as well, we found out in the 90s. At the time, her family was the largest family that carried another genetic mutation similar to this disease. And the whole tree, everyone had to get tested. So when I was pregnant, I had to go through one of the universities in Boston and get in touch with them to find out, did I need to get tested? And luckily, my mother was not a carrier. Therefore, I didn't. But, I don't know. Most people don't think about that when they get pregnant.
Oh, yeah. Well, and this came up because it's my fiance's side of the family that has this situation, and long story short, there's a chance he could be a carrier for this disease in particular. It is something that's preventable, that if our child were born with it, they could be okay. But it's one of those things that you should know about it to make sure it doesn't create
100%.
complications. Right. But I think it is one of those things that, again, can be so emotional for people. And we have a history of memory. I don't know if it's Alzheimer's or dementia in particular, but I know my great grandmother on my mom's side had that challenge. And unfortunately, we're not close to her mother, so no clue if it's going to continue to work its way down. And I know obviously genetics can still pass it, even if that person next in line doesn't have it. But I think, unfortunately, at this rate, it is very prevalent, I think, in most people's families at some point. And so I think, that is part of the emotion of it, is watching somebody else go through it, and then that affecting the decisions you want to make. Because I think for 100%. A lot of people, you see what your mom's going through, and you might have a different approach or the same approach. You mentioned that she doesn't want people to see her a certain way. And maybe that came from her watching her family, do that.
I know what my mom's wishes are, because we've discussed it. Everything's very well documented, but it's made us, like myself and my husband in particular, really rethink about what our wishes, we made we did our paperwork when we had 2 kids, and I was 31 years old, right, when I had my second. So that's different when you're 45 and watching your mom deteriorate with Alzheimer's.
I just love about, what you're focusing on and doing, like you said, is just honoring her memory and trying to tell her story in a way that she would want to be talked about, and, do all of this with her. So,
and I think it's important to note that she did it alone. And I think that people who are coming from a single parent household, listen, my dad was in the picture till I was 17. So he was an excellent provider. My mom didn't work. My mom was really a stay-at-home mom for, she started having my oldest brother she had when she was 20, and she had me at 35. So really, but it was a different generation, and he was a different person, and she did it alone. And I think that's an important part of the story. And I think it's something important that women need to know, is that we can do it alone and raise beautiful families and have amazing kids and have great relationships with our kids and our grandkids. And that's who my mom is.
No, and I just think it's beautiful that you are,
thank you,
highlighting that and being able to share her story in a way that's going to inspire other people, because I know that so many parts of your story, I'm sure people can see that in themselves, whether it's having a single mom, whether it's taking care of a parent with dementia, right? I think there's so many different ways that people can see pieces of themselves in your story and be able to, like you said, feel that they're not alone, and know that somebody else out there at least understands what they're going through, right?
I hope so. And I hope, having so many voices from so many different, backgrounds can also help build bridges and tolerance and educate people.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, thank you for sharing.
Thank you for having me.
Hey, friend, thank you so much for being here and for spending this time with us today. I hope that this reminded you of something really important, that you are not alone in this process. Whether you're navigating the early signs, in the middle of chaos, or trying to make sense of everything as it changes, there are people who understand, and there are stories like Wendy's that can help you feel a little more grounded throughout it all. If you want to hear more from Wendy, be sure to check out This Is Your Brain on Mom. I'll have it linked in the show notes so you can follow along with their journey and the way they're honoring their mom's story. And as always, if this episode meant something to you, it would mean so much if you shared it with someone who might need it too, or left a review. This helps more caregivers find us. Feel free to join us on Instagram at carecollective.podcast, and we'll see you next time.